j'aimerais bien que tu sois...
Que je sois comment?
Je sais pas, que tu sois épanoui, que tu...
Non, moi, je suis épanouie avec toi.
Je sais pas, j'aimerais bien te voir heureuse.
So in the process of returning to watching movies as a hobby, I came across a movie called Duck Butter. Released in 2018 at Tribeca, the movie didn't generate a lot of attention outside of the film festival circuit. Despite this, there were two things that initially drew me to watching it. The first point of interest being the pair of lead actresses. Laia Costa, who I've known for a long time from one of my personal favorite movies, Victoria, and Aaliyah Shawkat, who I'm also familiar with through a different movie that I'm fond of, Green Room. The second point of interest was the premise of the movie. Two strangers that meet in a bar propose a radical plan to spend the next 24 hours together in order to speed run the otherwise standard procedure for forming a relationship. It's a novel idea for sure, and I went in without expecting much more than some hangover tier shenanigans to unfold throughout the duration of the 24 hours. But after finishing the film, I came out of it overanalyzing what would have been the root cause for the inevitable climax of the film, while also reminiscing about another film that handled this very same subject matter with a more subtle approach. In the beginning of Duck Butter, the two leads begin their relationship with no time wasted, exploring each other with the veracity of people discovering their new favorite dish for the first time. As the movie progresses, though, we start to see this energy slowly dissipate as both parties begin to comprehend the reality of their situation. The relationship eventually ends just as abruptly as it began, very emotionally charged, very spur of the moment, and very passionate. While the notion of fast-tracking a relationship in the way that they committed to it was done with pure intentions, it skipped a very vital step in the process. What is normally considered the discovery phase of dating was superseded by both of the girls leading with passion alone, to the point that a true foundation was never fully formed in the relationship, thus setting them up for failure from the start. It was tragic to witness, and truthfully, it's a pitfall that contributes to a sizable number of failed relationships, especially in modern times, which led me to realize that I've seen a story with this kind of progression in the past, even when I didn't recognize it during my initial viewing. Now, for the most part, blue is the warmest color needs no introduction. Released in 2013, Blue won many awards during its film festival and theatrical runs, including many Best Foreign Film nominations as well as the Palme d'Or from the Cannes Film Festival. Putting aside its critical acclaim, you may have also heard about the film through its major controversies regarding certain scenes that it's arguably most famous for. For those of you that have never heard of this movie, here's a quick summary. The movie follows Adele during a significant period of self-discovery as she begins a relationship with Emma, and we witness how Adele changes over time within the lens of said relationship. The premise seems basic on its own, but what garnered a lot of attention for this movie was the controversies surrounding the extremely explicit sex scenes that take place in the second act shortly after the relationship has begun. So, obviously, my then 19-year-old male curiosity was piqued when I got word about those controversies. But as the years went by and that novelty began to wane, there were still parts of the story that lingered in the back of my mind up until my most recent rewatch earlier last year. I can confidently say that watching this film with the clarity has dramatically changed how I interpreted the story and led me to examine it with a critical lens, in the same way that Duck Butter caught me by surprise with its deceptively simple premise. Passion is a central theme to Blue is the Warmest Color, with the main focus of the film being Adele's invisible struggle with finding passion of her own in a broader sense. Although we only get snapshots of Adele's life, we follow her journey of self-discovery in the form of 3 major acts, all centered around her passion for Emma. Before Emma, the relationship, and the aftermath, with each act ending with major influence to her character moving forward. I believe that passion is a core component of any relationship, but far too often it is used as a proxy to fill in for the other core components that make up the whole of a relationship. Passion in itself is not a bad thing, but it's a subject that is often misinterpreted in ways that can lead a person to act outside of their own moral judgment. Today I want to discuss how passion played a crucial role in both the beginning and ending of Blue, and what we can learn from our outside perspective of the life of Adele. Also, for the record, I briefly touched on the main controversy of the movie being the explicit sex scenes, but in regards to the subject matter, I feel that they are actually integral to the plot, so we will be going over them in detail at about this point in the video. So feel free to skip around if you feel it necessary. Our introduction to Adele is notably subdued compared to what the promotional material would have you believe about the movie. Adele lives the life of an aloof and unassuming teenager, complete with her gossiping friend group and their shifting object of affection in Tomas. Adele seems visibly detached from the goings-on of her friend group around her, to the point that she was oblivious to Tomas signaling his interest in pursuing her for some time up to this point. Adele is shown to be more introspective than her peers, as her focus is tuned whenever literature is involved, be it in class or at home during her own private writing sessions. Her encounter with Tomas was likely acted on thanks to the social pressure put onto her by her friend group, as her interactions with him are dry and project a sense of obligation rather than genuine interest. That is, until a chance meeting on the street has Adele crossing paths with Emma for the first time, which immediately commands Adele's full attention. During the date with Tomas, Adele struggles to connect with him in a meaningful way. It was a successful date in the broader sense, but during the night, the image of Emma persists in Adele's mind, so much so that she appeared in an intense sexual fantasy that makes Adele question her own sexuality once she wakes up. Confused, Adele is once again placed under social pressure from her friend group to advance her relationship with Tomas. After their entanglement, we can observe a peculiar reaction from Adele. We learn later on that this was the moment when she lost her virginity, but in the aftermath, she looks unsatisfied and even sad, as if she was second-guessing her actions leading up to this point. It's these moments, and her confession to her openly gay friend Valentine, that culminate in the abrupt dissolution of her relationship with Tomas, which devastated both of them and served as foreshadowing for future events in the film. The breaking of Tomas's heart is especially poignant because during the course of their short relationship, Adele and Tomas were shown to be mostly incompatible aside from physical attraction to each other. And even then, it was mainly perpetuated by Tomas pursuing Adele and Adele acquiescing in the first place. In the chain of events that follow, Adele lands herself in the setting of a lesbian bar and stumbling into another chance meeting with Emma. The flirting between the two is innocent at first, but the air shifts once the topic of art is brought up, and Emma begins to explain the history of her art background as if a switch inside of her had been flipped. It's in this moment that Emma's passion for art shines through, almost involuntarily, but she dials it back before going too in-depth and risking losing Adele's interest. This is an interesting parallel with Adele's date with Tomas, with Adele now being the one playing catch-up to someone else explaining their passion. Many of the early scenes of their developing relationship follow this general framework. Emma, being slightly older and more mature than Adele, takes the lead role in introducing Adele to her world through art and philosophy, while Adele, although receptive, has her focus mainly centered on Emma herself. During a picnic taking place after a visit to a museum, Emma makes a point to highlight Adele's eating habits, which up to this point of the movie have been given an unusual amount of screen time for its total duration. Adele's confession of being a voracious eater serves as a key to truly understand how she operates psychologically. Just as she mentioned earlier in their meeting at the bar, for her, it's either all or nothing depending on if she's interested in the subject. And with the exciting prospect of a new lifestyle being presented to her through Emma, Adele effectively has the blinders on and can only see Emma in her future. Adele is first to make a move, sharing a tender kiss with Emma, which immediately escalates into much, much more. Now, for as infamous as this movie is for its graphic sex scenes, the picnic scene really puts into perspective the reasoning for such an abrupt shift in tone. When we observe Adele in the moments building up to their first intimate scene, it's very often the case that Adele's focus is trained on Emma, most notably on intimate body parts such as her lips and breasts. The tender kiss scene is notable because up to this point, Emma was generally the one taking the lead, but concedes the position to Adele, who is initially hesitant, likely due to the previous mishap with the girl from her friend group earlier. Despite the intense and almost violent nature of their intimacy, this is directly in line for Adele's character. She has already established herself as an all-or-nothing type of person, as evident when she attempted a second kiss with the girl from her friend group. This leads me to believe that there would have been no other way to depict Adele in her rawest form, or to do her appetite for exploration justice. I did find an interesting parallel between her first scene with Emma versus her first scene with Tomas, however. Just like before, in the aftermath of the entanglement, Adele is seen with a distant look in her eye and a tear crossing the bridge of her nose. I have my theory as to why that is, but we'll get to that point shortly. We have now officially entered the second act of the film, and Adele and Emma's relationship is in full swing. As is common with many new relationships, they can't keep their hands off of each other. Emma's presence helps to encourage Adele's curiosity to blossom, as seen during the Pride Parade when Adele becomes more comfortable being affectionate towards Emma in public. Coupled with this personal exploration comes a stage where they meet each other's families for the first time, and the contrast between them is polarizing to say the least. The atmosphere of Emma's family home is very relaxed and liberal, with both parents showcasing where Emma inherited her artistic nature from. In another callback to the picnic scene, Adele is initiated into the family by way of being taught how to eat oysters, which she previously mentioned a distaste for. Emma's parents are very encouraging towards their relationship, which leads to Adele opening up about her interest, not passion, in teaching. During the discussion with Emma's parents, Adele outlines the future steps it would take to achieve her goal, but when she is questioned further by Emma, her response is lukewarm.
Ouais, non, je comprends, mais pour l'instant, je sais que c'est ça qui me plaît.
For now, it's what interests me. The delivery of this line paints it as a mundane answer, but in truth, this one line serves as the crux of the entire story. This is a moment that slipped past me during my rewatch, but upon further inspection, I believe this scene ultimately shines the most direct light on Adele's character. Sadly, the welcoming atmosphere presented by Emma's family is not emulated by Adele's parents. In her home, the atmosphere is a lot more tense due to her parents leaning more to the conservative side, a fact that comes into focus when Adele's father questions Emma about her boyfriend. After more boundary-pushing questions by Adele's father, it is revealed that Emma was invited under the guise of being a tutor for Adele's philosophy class. This situation makes Emma visibly uncomfortable, and it seems Adele is not able to fully commit to the lifestyle change as of yet, no doubt still harboring shame from the social stigma attached to being attracted to the same sex. Following this, we move into an abrupt time skip that advances us a few years into their relationship. Adele has become a teacher just as she mentioned earlier, and lives together with Emma, who now sports blonde hair in place of her original blue styling. This visual change contrasts heavily with Adele herself, as she looks virtually identical to when we last saw her, despite the movie showing us a clear indication of time passing. We are shown an extended shot of Adele making preparations for an extravagant party for Emma's colleagues, coincidentally brushing off advances of her own work colleagues to facilitate. But as the party progresses, we find Adele noticeably out of place amongst the crowd. In this atmosphere, she stands out as the only person not actively involved in the art world, and this causes a great deal of anxiety within her. This is compounded upon when it is shown that Emma has become uncomfortably close to another female colleague during the night's festivities. This uncomfortable energy persists into the night as Adele and Emma rest in bed together. Emma makes a point to try encouraging Adele to pursue things that she truly enjoys and to find a deeper fulfillment for herself other than work, to which Adele insists that her life with Emma is the fulfillment that she needs. Emma is unconvinced, however, going so far as to reject Adele's advances toward her, which leaves Adele despondent and staring blankly into the dark. The way that Emma raises the issue comes from a place of genuine concern, which has been on display even as far back as when they first began dating, but unfortunately it falls on deaf ears. Wrought with feelings of rejection, Adele now turns to her male co-worker for attention, the same one who she had rejected earlier in favor of Emma's party, in fact. What appeared to be an innocent night out for drinks and dancing quickly spirals into a much more passionate session, which evolves into a full-blown affair at record speed. Adele's decision lends way to disaster, though, as Emma catches Adele red-handed returning from a night out with her coworker. What follows is the most emotionally charged scene in the entire movie, on par with those that it's most famous for, as Emma violently kicks Adele out for her betrayal.
Prends tes affaires! Dégage! Je veux pas d'une petite traînée chez moi! Tu dégages! Allez, hop!
Non, mais j'ai rien fait, ce mec, j'ai rien!
Arrête!
Mais c'est rien! Mais me fais pas partir, je vais où? Sans toi, je vais où?
Va voir ce mec! Vas-y!
Leaving Adele absolutely distraught as she wanders the streets in disarray. As tragic as it is, this misfortune was brought about by Adele's own hand. While the relationship started out strongly between the two, As time progressed and Emma's focus was geared towards her passion for art, Adele's focus remained unchanged and pertained solely of her passion for her current relationship with Emma. This type of tunnel vision led to Adele remaining in a type of stasis, with no forward development of her character, save for her desired career. The waning connection between the two and the anxiety surrounding the incident with Emma and her colleague at the party returned Adele to a state of vulnerability that echoes the beginning of her journey of self-discovery. With that return to familiar waters, she once again chose to search for another outlet of immediate gratification to satisfy her needs, all the while never addressing the root cause of the rift that formed between herself and Emma. In this sense, she stays true to her character patterns, but it came at the immense cost of the dissolution of her relationship and, by extension, her entire world. For the film's third act, there is a jump cut juxtaposing Adele's lowest point of the film to a vibrant scene of a school performance that Adele had been prepping her class for earlier in the film. What should be a joyous occasion is undermined by the visible lack of emotion on Adele's face. During the following sequence of dismissal for summer break, all of the strength she had used to keep her composure for her students falls away as she immediately breaks down into tears the moment she is afforded privacy in her classroom. Adele has become a shell of her former self, as evident in her portrayal from this point of the movie onward. Many of the remaining scenes consist of her deeply seated in depression and crying at the thought of what is now lost to her. In one heartbreaking scene in particular, she returns to the bench where she and Emma shared their first outing together and solemnly lays across the seat in the emptiness of the park. In the most shocking twist of fate, she eventually transforms into the very thing she opposed in her youth. She has now become the type of teacher that stifles creativity, a hard ass, if you will, which is in stark contrast to our first introduction to her role as a teacher during the second act. The distant look in her eyes has become magnitudes worse over time, but we as the audience have become well acquainted with this form of expression from her. Just as it was shown in the aftermath of her intimacy with both Tomas and Emma, her expression projects a feeling of slight dissatisfaction, as if she went into the act with expectation and was still left wanting, left searching for the experience she originally envisioned. I believe that this is the reason she shed a tear after her first time with Emma. While the experience itself was new and enjoyable, she may have subconsciously knew that even this was not enough, effectively realizing that Emma is also what interests her now. This revelation would also evoke the brief relationship she had with Tomas, and not wanting to go through that type of heartbreak again, she would convince herself to go all or nothing with this new relationship with Emma, in a misguided attempt to complete her search for her passion. This now marks the second time Adele's search has backfired on her, and in that pit of despair, she composes herself enough to arrange a meeting with Emma at a cafe. The meeting starts off innocent at first, with an underlying sense of tension. Conversation is kept light between the two until Adele is questioned about her work life. On the surface, she explains the fulfillment she feels by helping the children in her class, but when complimented by Emma, her response is still as lukewarm as it was when she expressed her aspirations to Emma and her parents originally. Adele then switches the conversation focus to Emma and her relationship, but to her surprise, Emma seems fully content with her new life together with Lzls, the work colleague from the party, and even confesses that she forgave Adele for her past transgression. This sends Adele into full desperation mode as she makes advances on Emma, leaning into full-on sexual assault. But in the heat of the moment, Emma regains her composure and pulls away.
Je suis avec quelqu'un maintenant. Tu sais ça. Et j'ai une infinie tendresse pour toi. Je t'en ai toujours. Toute ma vie.
This is a beautiful sentiment on its own, but it signals the end of Adele's hope of ever reconnecting with Emma in the future, which devastates her even further. The pair tearfully say their goodbyes as they separate on a bittersweet note, but thankfully this isn't their final meeting. After some time passes, we follow Adele entering into an art gallery, showcasing works from none other than Emma herself. This time, the meeting is less emotionally charged and more socially awkward as both parties try to navigate the level of formality that the situation calls for. What's notable is that even with Adele's attempts to appear older and more mature, she still appears out of place in this atmosphere, just as she did during the previous house party. It's here that the fated confrontation between Adele and Lzls happens, which Emma is privy to in the background outside of earshot. During this brief but tense moment, Lzls points out that Adele's presence is still within the gallery, and thereby part of Emma's history, to which Adele brushes off the subtly hostile remark. As Lzls leaves, Adele runs into the familiar face of Samir, one of Emma's other art colleagues from the house party that Adele shared a dance with. Samir is excited to see her again and reminds her of their previous conversation about Adele traveling abroad to New York as a means to expand her outlook on life. This sentiment may have been ineffective in the past, but this time Adele acknowledges Samir's words and quietly exits the gallery alone as she moves into the next chapter of her life. While it may not appear to be on the surface, I take this as a happy ending for the movie, all things considered. As we follow up on the aftermath of Adele and Emma's relationship, we're subject to the often overlooked blowback of relationships developed solely on passion for another person. An interesting point I picked up on is that through Adele, we get to see the effects of both being the person that's the subject of obsession with Tomas, and the person obsessing over another with Emma. In both cases, the relationship falls out from under itself during the first major conflict due to the lack of a strong starting foundation between the two parties. Also in both cases, the major catalysts for these conflicts come by way of one party, Adele, lacking a strong enough foundation of their own accord to bring to the relationship to begin with. For what little we see of Tomas, he wasn't given the chance to expand upon his character much, but with Emma, she already had a path she was set on before Adele entered the picture, and continued to work on it well after the dissolution of their relationship. Contrast that with the before and after image of Adele, whose entire character arc was focused on finding really anything that could be considered a passion, be it Tomas, Emma, teaching, or otherwise. Once that passion was lost, she was a complete wreck, until the last cycle, where all we can do is hope that she finds a more permanent solution to her personal problem. For this reason, I feel that the original French title, The Life of Adele, communicates the theme of the movie much better than the American/international title. For the entire journey of Adele's story, it was never solely focused on her sexuality, but instead about searching for a passion to give her life direction. What she found with Emma was definitely passionate in the beginning, but Adele took it as the entire answer as opposed to an opportunity to expand her worldview, just as Samir had referenced before. I don't doubt that Adele truly loved Emma, but it seems the passion felt for her was also being used to mitigate the discomfort and confusion she felt during her process of self-discovery, stemming all the way back to her brief time with Tomas. Watching this movie without being blindsided by the sex scenes was a truly eye-opening experience. If you take away the shock value, we are left with an honest and raw depiction of what a passionate relationship can look like, and the potential outcome of what happens when passion serves double duty as the full foundation of said relationship. That isn't to say that you can't have an aspect of your passion be another person, but in Adele's case, her search for her passion preceded her interaction with Emma. The moral that I took away from this story is that passion as a subject is much more intricate when it comes to love as a whole. If anything, this movie can be used as a cautionary tale against seeing passion for another person as the penultimate answer to the more complex personal problems that go along with relationships. Just as in Duck Butter, yes, it can work for a time, but eventually the time will come for the hard questions to come to the forefront, and it'll be a lot easier on both parties to be honest and evaluate what's going on in the relationship beforehand. Okay, so this took entirely too long to work on, and it wasn't even a particularly difficult video either, but that's mainly my fault, so I've just gotta eat that one. But the same thing happened like with my other long form videos, and I realized how personal the subject matter of this video was to me. So in the end, I'm happy it came out, but also I'm gonna take this time to kind of reevaluate some things. Ironically, while working on this video for passion, I kind of lost my passion with this whole project, and that bugs me a little bit. A lot of the journey working on this video, I kind of switched gears to be more focused on the numbers aspect of everything, and that's when I started slowing down. But this was never about the numbers. It's always been about the conversation. And I feel like I lost sight of that while trying to push forward for a consistent schedule. So I'm gonna be shifting focus to some different avenues for a little bit. And once I get rolling with the longer videos again, I'll probably be better at it. Well, I will be better at it, let's say. So until then, I guess we'll just have to see. And it'll be a lot easier on both parties to be honest and evaluate what's going on in the relationship beforehand. Fucking done.